Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I want to hear how it's going for you. I'm tired of always having it be about me, Tony.
Right.
It's not always about me. Occasionally, it needs to be about you.
You're not the only one that's tired of it always being about you. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about everybody else. But it is going well. The weather, I think spring, I shouldn't even say it. I think spring is finally here. I think it is finally sprung, and you're seeing it in the trees. You're feeling it in the warmth of the sun. I think, and again, I should not say this, but I think we've made it.
Yeah, this is that bittersweet time of the year when I think, oh, hooray, spring is finally here, and then I go, I gotta go change the oil in my mower and figure out, do I need to sharpen the blades? Like, there's so much, Tony. There's so much stuff to do. We should get going with today's show so that then I can go mow my lawn at some point.
Let's do it.
It is lawn mowing season, Tony. Cannot wait. All right, so I guess your silence means it's time for me to ask the first question, or to read, I guess, the first question. The first question is from @bfissel14585. Is anyone inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center willing to talk about whether Julian Sayin is a hard worker? Some extremely gifted athletes are successful through high school by relying on God-given talent, and unlike Jeremiah Smith, they plateau.
Well, first let's strike the notion, and it's not said here implicitly, but Jeremiah Smith is a hard worker. It's not just the God-given talent that he's got that makes him what he is. So like he's working on that. And yeah, when you talk to people about Julian Sayin, if you want to be a starting quarterback at Ohio State, I think Julian has said this, Ryan Day has said this, you've got to be the first one in and the last one out. And so that's the goal. And you're almost competing, like the quarterbacks are competing to get there first and to stay there last. And it's like the old radio contest where you keep your hand on a car to try and win that car. They're like keeping their hands on the starting quarterback job, and it's like the first one that has to go, use the restroom or something is going to lose the job. So they're all locked in. And Julian Sayin's a hard worker. He's got arm talent and all of that stuff, but that's going to take way more than that, as we've seen in the spring with him being up and down and still progressing. But yeah, he's a hard worker. They would have, if he wasn't, he wouldn't be here. They would have vetted that out when he's looking to transfer or when they were recruiting him. So they're very well aware of what he is off the field, and they see it. And I don't think you need to be an Iron Buckeye to be proven that you're a hard worker. He's doing what you would want a starting quarterback to do, and he's got to watch Will Howard do it and learn from the best in terms of being that worker, that leader. So he's got a good example. And no, I've not heard anything about any lack of hard work or anything other than he's in it for the long haul.
Well, I think you not only, first of all, when you're going through the recruiting process, you kind of people know, like, your coaches are going to tell you, you're the first in, last out guy, or you're not, or you're just kind of coasting. And when you're going through the camp circuit, like, coaches will see, how do you respond to coaching? Are you focused? Are you really kind of going through things? They're going to have you go up on the chalkboard. They're going to have you watch film. They're going to have you try and diagnose stuff and discuss stuff. And, you can tell that's not something you can just go up and wing it. You've got to be able to, there is a certain amount of, you've got to have ground a certain amount of film to be able to be able to just sort of recognize and have that, just the mental reps to be able to discuss all that stuff. So, you generally are not going to have guys come in and it's just like, whoa. This guy's like, dipping out to I'm gonna go leave practice early today, go play 18. It's a nice day. Like, if a guy is like that, that long before he walks into the building. And then once the guy gets in the building, we talk to all sorts of players and all sorts of coaches, and there are ways that they'll tell you, like, yeah, it's still, he's still working on some stuff. And they're not going to say, yeah, this dude's a lazy bag of crap. They don't say that, but there are ways that they'll tell you, like, yeah, still working on being more consistent, still working on some of the off-field stuff and all that kind of stuff, maturing, coming along as a player, all that, and a person, all that kind of stuff. You'll hear that sometime. You haven't heard that about Julian Sayin, and really to the kind of to the contrary, the guys. I mean, we talked about this on the last show. The guys at the NFL Combine who are no longer with the program and are not bound by any kind of you've got to speak nicely about your teammates thing. They'll tell you either real positive things, or there are ways to say stuff without saying stuff. And all the feedback on Julian Sayin from guys at the Combine was, yeah, he is that dude. He is, he's put it, he can get there. He's going to, he is kind of the next man up. You don't say that unless you've seen that guy not only have the physical talent, but also putting in the work. Like you're not coasting as a true freshman at Ohio State and then have these respected senior leaders go, yeah, oh yeah, that guy's that dude. Mm-hmm. Like if Denzel Burke is vouching for you as this, this guy is going to be legit, this guy is the real deal, you are not like strolling in like Spicoli 5 minutes into class and having Denzel Burke go like, oh yeah, that guy's. Denzel Burke has told us in lots of different ways about lots of different players, about guys who are like not there yet. It was very much, yeah, that guy's there right now, kind of with Julian Sayin. So yeah, I don't think in my mind there's any question about work ethic or makeup there with him.
I think asking Denzel Burke about Spicoli would be fantastic. He doesn't take class seriously or whatever. Yeah, he would give. He always gives the honest assessment, and if there was anything bad there, I think he would have said it in however many words he would have needed to say it.
Aloha, my name is Mr. Burke. I love it. Love it. All right, so from @SilverBullets1, is it possible for Bo Jackson to start this year, or is it too early? I think my assumption is it's got to be too early. I think we have seen plenty of flashes from Bo Jackson in the spring. We've talked about Bo Jackson multiple times this spring. James Peoples is someone they feel very, very, very good about as the first string running back. So, unless you have injuries or something like that, you're probably not going to see you're going to see James Peoples as running back one this season. I think you're going to see Bo Jackson have a meaningful role this year, whether that's ahead or behind C.J. Donaldson by the time of the season's over, we'll see. But I mean, you think back, what years have there been true freshman running backs who are starting for Ohio State? I mean, just kind of going back through J.K. Dobbins, that was in 2017, and that's because Mike Weber got hurt. Mm-hmm. Beanie Wells started in 2000 and what? Did he start in 2005? Did he?
He was a freshman in 2006, but that was Antonio Pittman.
Okay. Yeah, and did
Travion Henderson eventually started.
Yeah, Travion Henderson did. Yeah, in 2021, right? Yeah, yep. 2021. But you look at the other running backs in the room in 2021. You didn't have future first rounder other than Travion Henderson, and he may be a future second rounder, whatever. But you didn't have another guy who people were going, yes, this is that dude, in the way that you're kind of hearing people talk about James Peoples. Carlos Loughlin is not ever going to say, yeah, this guy's going to be a future All-Pro, but he talks about James Peoples in a way that you can tell he likes James Peoples a lot and thinks James Peoples is ready. And you pointed this out, 2 carries for 6 yards in the spring game. That tells me they feel like, okay, this is RB1, and you just, you know what you got. You don't need to have him, running into guys and getting banged up. You know what you got. Let's see, what the other guys are.
Yeah, 2 carries in the spring game. And so I went back, wrote a spring recap of the running backs. I'm doing it position by position right now for the next week or so. And so, and what I wrote about the running backs, you go back and look, and last year, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins each had 4 carries in the spring game. C.J. Donaldson also had 4 carries in the spring game. Mayan Williams had 4 in 2023. Travion Henderson was out. In 2022, the year after, Travion Henderson rushed for over 1,000 yards as a true freshman. Henderson had 3 carries when he's the returning starter. So that gives you an idea of the importance of the lack of carries in the spring game. It's just a sign of good things to come, or a sign of, we've seen enough. Now, to answer the question, is it possible for Bo Jackson to start this year? I would say it is possible because Curtis Samuel started a game in 2014 as a true freshman when Ezekiel Elliott was the established starter, his first year starting, but things happen. And so to start a game, sure. To win the job, I don't think that's going to happen. But it's Tom, you said the way that Carlos Lachlan and Ryan Day talk about James Peoples, they also talk about Bo Jackson in a way that they don't generally talk about true freshmen. So that is something to take note of. But yeah, I don't see him starting this year. Could he start a game? Sure. We've seen how many years in a row where a freshman cornerback started a game until this past last year. But things happen, and they've got two guys at the top that they like, but anything can happen over the course of a very long season.
This feels like a good time to distinguish to start a game. The question was to start this year, and to start a game is very different than to become the starter. If you're the starter, that's probably you have surpassed everyone on the depth chart, or maybe someone got hurt and you've surpassed everyone else. To start a game, yes. To become the starter and everyone's healthy and he's RB1, that would be pretty surprising to me. I think he's going to win a bigger role. I think we have talked very positively about him. I think we did three shows in a row or something like that where we talked about like, oh boy, when we watch practice, this guy sure does look good. Mm-hmm. And so we're not trying to talk you down about him. I think it's just sort of this is a relatively this is still a talented running back room. So for a true freshman to even break into the rotation at some point this year would be a like, all right, that you really have done something meaningful there. I think that's a realistic expectation for him. Break into the rotation where you're getting 6-8 carries a game as part of the rotation with James Peoples and CJ Donaldson, but not necessarily. This is the guy who's getting 12 carries before halftime when both of the other guys are also healthy. That's probably going to be a little more than you can really expect. Next one from at S Pathfinder 1, who has quietly climbed the depth chart this spring to possibly make the 2 deep. Do you want to go first on this one?
Well, no, go ahead, because I want to hear what you have to say, because one of the guys I would mention is somebody that I mentioned on the last show, but this is also not an easy question.
It's not an easy question because I feel like you kind of go around the positions and it's, I think, frankly, we could talk about Bo Jackson here, where he's, I don't know how quietly he's climbed the depth chart, but, you could absolutely see him as, minimally James Peoples and then CJ Donaldson or Bo Jackson. I could absolutely see that being, if they actually put out a depth chart, I could see that being something, because that would basically be the role I just talked about in the last answer. So I think he's a possibility. I think Mylan Graham is certainly, Mylan Graham just had a very quiet freshman year, and that was a result of showing up in June. He really made a leap where you had kind of heard positive things about him, and the resume suggested that he was, maybe ready to take that next step. I think we certainly saw him take that next step to the point where I would say Mylan Graham is either wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5. And it's either he or Bryson Rogers probably right now as wide receiver 4. So, he is certainly in that 2 deep, and, he probably would have been in that 2 deep one way or the other, but he certainly climbed that ladder a little bit in terms of the order and maybe the expectation in terms of how much he might play. Quincy Porter. I'll tell you what, I'll do offense since I'm just blasting through all the offense and you can do defense. Quincy Porter is someone who, again, you saw the star ranking, you heard coaches talk about him, and he, I think, is probably ahead of where I would have expected him to be. So, he's probably wide receiver 6 right now, probably coming out of the spring, but you could see him potentially being in that, being a legitimate in the rotation guy at some point during the course of the season. And then on the offensive line, the guy who you talked about on the last show, who was kind of the first person that jumped into my mind here, was Jake Cook, second team left guard during a bunch of the spring practices. I would say he's, right now coming out of spring, based on what we saw, he's in the two deep. He certainly was not someone that we would have expected to see in the two deep, just because true freshmen being in the two deep on the offensive line is fairly rare. And normally it's like, well, Paris Johnson, former 5-star recruit, is the guy, and he's so talented, you just can't keep him off the field. Jay Cook didn't have that kind of recruiting profile, but then we consistently saw him with the twos at left guard during the spring. I don't know that he's the third guard by any means, but if he's based on that, he's certainly in the two deep, and that's certainly someone who I would not have expected to see there going into the spring. So those are probably my answers on the offensive side of the ball.
I'll throw one other out there, and you mentioned Bryson Rogers, and the thing is, like, he's not climbing the depth chart because he's right there, or he's in the two deep, so because there's only so many guys, but he's somebody that is, I think maybe we're not talking about enough. So he fits the quiet portion of this, maybe not the climbing, but he's in that two deep. Defensively, again, there's not a lot of guys that from outside of the two deep that have climbed into the two deep. So it's almost, we've got to adjust the question. I think there's a chance that Logan George could get some starts this season at defensive end and be just part of that rotation where they've got 3 or 4 starters, and that's just what they are. Like, they've done that before. Larry Johnson has done that in the past. People got to see a little bit of what Logan George can do in the spring game, but I don't know. Malik Hartford is another guy that comes to my mind, but mainly because of the quiet thing, or he's been in the two deep since his true freshman year, so he's always been there. But seeing him almost exclusively with the ones in the spring, I think is maybe something we haven't talked enough about. And so I guess technically he is climbing, because when you talk to say like Lathan Ransom or Emeka Ibuka, I think Emeka Ibuka a couple of times has singled out Jalen McLean as a guy that, watch out for this guy, he's really, really good. And so we just assume it's going to be Caleb Downs and Jalen McLean as the two safeties. But when we see so much of the spring is Caleb Downs in the boundary, and that's what Jalen McLean has been doing. So now you've got Malik Hartford to the field basically with the ones, and maybe he's your free safety, and maybe Caleb Downs is your strong safety, or maybe this spring was just about getting Caleb Downs to work at strong safety just so he can, So there's who knows what it's going to look like this spring or this season. But I think Malik Hartford quietly, got a lot of good reps. The corners, I mean, their top 4, they're all in the two deep, and I don't see anybody unseating Jermaine Matthews or Davis Igbinosun. Nickel seems to be going just fine. Lorenzo Styles, I thought, had a quietly a very good spring, and whenever we saw him, he was making plays. But I don't know, I don't know that there's anybody that has come out of the threes and gone into the twos, other than, I'd say Will Smith Jr. working with the twos. I don't know that that's coming out of the threes, because when you look at nose tackle, it's Cade McDonald, it's Will Smith, and it's Eric Mensah. And so I think he's always been ahead of Mensah. But that's what I've got. Is there anybody that I'm missing that is coming out of the threes and into the twos, other than maybe like a Riley Pettyjohn or TJ Alford? Now, with Garrett Stover being out at will, those guys were able to get some more work with Peyton Pierce.
Yeah, I don't think there's someone going from 3 to 2 necessarily, which is really kind of the spirit of the technical question here. I think in terms of guys who are maybe climbing the depth chart, I kind of feel like Peyton Pierce may be going from a 2 to a 1A to a certain degree, where he's going to be that third linebacker the way that Arvell Reese was last year, for example, for Ohio State, or Cody Simon was the year before that. He was really mostly special teams only last year. You saw him some on defense, but really he was, just kind of garbage time snaps there. He feels like he really made a move this spring, to the point where I'm expecting him to get first half snaps against good opponents this fall, which is not necessarily what you would have expected going into the spring. So I think he might be someone else you could kind of lump into that conversation, even if it's not exactly what the question asked. I did, as you were talking through, and as I'm talking through, I'm kind of frantically thinking, I'm not forgetting anyone, am I? And I'm really, for the first time, really relating to Ryan Day, where, you ask, which of the young guys has shown up, has really looked good so far? And he goes, I don't want to forget anyone. And so he doesn't want to answer the question. I got to tell you, for the first time, I kind of get it, because I'm like, oh boy, I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. I don't want to leave anyone out who we should be talking about here.
Maybe Dominic Kirks.
Yeah, Dominic Kirks. We saw a decent amount with the defensive ends, and he's probably, if you have C.J. Hicks and Logan George as 3 and 4 at defensive ends, is he 5? Is he closer to 4? We saw him make plays, but it felt like we saw him a lot with the 3s making plays, but somewhat with the 2s. So yeah, I think he's another good person to lump in there, at least to some degree, to the point where you look at him, you're like, yeah, he could get some meaningful playing time this year. Is he technically in the 2 deep? Maybe, but you could see him, playing. How much did Mitchell Melton play last year? You could see him playing as much as Mitchell Melton played last year, maybe, depending on how C.J. Hicks continues to grow, depending on how Logan George continues to develop, and going back to the question about that we got earlier about Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry, how much of those guys continue to develop. So there's just a lot of potential moving parts there. But yeah, you could definitely see Dominic Kirks in the rotation to some degree this fall as well. From Scott O'Neill, is quarterback the biggest question mark in your mind after watching spring practice, or is there another position or position group that needs to step it up in order to repeat? And to me, Tony, the answer there depends on, are we talking about the 1s or are we talking about the 2s?
Well, I would say in terms of position group as a whole, for me, I'm going to go back to defensive tackle. And I feel bad for these guys now, because I keep talking about other people. You keep talking about it. Like, I hope they don't read, like, just stay off of the internet, basically, because I think they're getting a lot of the criticism, or there's a lot of stories, because when Ryan Day says, yeah, we're going to take a hard look at the transfer portal, we're all writing about that. We're all talking about that. And not tangentially, we're talking about them. We're talking about, the Will Smith or Jason Moore, or like these Eric Mensa, Tywan Malone. Like, these are the guys that we're talking about. Like, they need to step up, and because they didn't necessarily do as much as the coaches were hoping this spring, then now you've got to figure out what you're going to do. I mean, even Matt Patricia said a week or so ago, like, they need to. We're giving them an opportunity to show why they were offered by Ohio State, why they've got scholarships, why they're at Ohio State. So I don't think that they saw as much as they wanted to, or frankly needed to. And the reason why that's an issue is because, sure, how many snaps are they looking at? Last year, if you look at the snap counts of the backup DTs, which were Caden McDonald and Edric Houston, who are now your starters, they were playing, 13 to, 8 to 15 snaps a game, basically. And so is that a lot? It's like, it's not a lot, but it's a lot when your starters are playing 50 snaps a game and not getting any rest, or not getting enough rest. And then they wear down over the course of a game, or they wear down over the course of a season. So this is about the overall health of the defense. And they've really liked their linebackers. Are they going to like the linebackers as much when the defensive tackles are getting occupied and the offensive line is getting to the linebackers? So, like, this is a thing where you saw. It's hard for me to get out of my memory just seeing how wide open the middle was in the spring game for a lot of these runs. And sure, some of it was just thud, but it's not thud at the line of scrimmage, really. Like, those guys are trying to win their battles. And so when you see guys get pushed that easily, that's a concern. And if those are the guys that are in for stretches, like, there are concerns there. But also just having the if you can't trust them enough to play them, then you're asking more of your starters. And the more and more you ask of your starters, at some point you got to be careful of not asking them to do too much. And then what happens? Regardless of that, what happens if somebody gets hurt? Like that, now you're in another situation. So I do think I think that's the biggest concern, which is interesting when you consider the total lack of experience at quarterback. So I would have no issue somebody saying quarterback is the biggest question mark, but when you look at Ryan Day's history, quarterbacks tend to work out.
Yeah, you don't know exactly who the quarterback is going to be, but they've got two guys on the team who are going to be, are experienced enough and are well coached enough and have been developed enough that they're going to be okay. The floor for a Ryan Day quarterback, really, outside of the first year with JT Barrett, when Ryan Day was just getting there, the floor for a Ryan Day quarterback has been Kyle McCord in 2023, where he was perfectly fine. He wasn't amazing. He wasn't CJ Stroud. He wasn't Justin Fields, but he was fine. He wasn't a bad quarterback. And if you have a Kyle McCord type season this year with whoever ends up starting, you're going to win 10 games. You're going to make the college football playoff. They would have made the college football playoff in 2023 as well. So I don't think it's this is not going to be a 2011, oh boy, it's Joe Bowserman or true freshman Braxton Miller. You have much better options there. The quarterback coaching at Ohio State is much better than it was back then. And until you see a Ryan Day quarterback really just fall flat on his face, I don't think I don't think that's something you're really going to worry about. You can have a ceiling conversation about what the quarterback position might be this year, but the floor is going to be fine. They're not going to be a disaster. The interior of the defensive line I think it's a concern because two things that you mentioned. Number one, you're a defensive tackle. You're in the middle of all these piles. If someone falls sideways on your leg, like, man, bad things can happen. Guys can miss time. And if you don't have anyone you trust behind them, and then one of these guys who it's like, well, could he get through can you get away with playing him 8 snaps a game? If that guy suddenly has to play 30, 40, 50 snaps a game, then you really are concerned. And also, just as you mentioned, guys wearing down. I go back to, remember the Notre Dame game in 2023 where Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau had to play every snap at defensive end because they just didn't want to rotate guys? You saw them wear down at the end of that game. Notre Dame came back late in the game. You saw some sustained drives towards the end of that year against the Ohio State defense because guys were wearing down. You're going to see that in the interior of the defensive line because Caden McDonald and Edric Houston are going to be really good this year. It feels like the ceiling in the interior of the defensive line for the ones is really high. But boy, there's a real drop off there behind those guys. And you need someone to step up and you need someone to step up to be playable to the point where they can trust them to play 10, 12 snaps a game against good competition. They'll be fine against Grambling. They'll be fine against Ohio. But, if you're playing, if you need to play Penn State and you need to get off the field in a goal line situation or late in the game, Caden McDonald is playing in that goal line situation last year where Ohio State had the goal line stop. You have to have guys who you can trust to be in that kind of moment at the end of a big game against a big opponent, and they aren't there yet. Could they get there this year with the guys they've got on the roster? Sure, absolutely, but they're not there yet. So they either need to get there with the guys they have, or they need to find someone in the portal who can get them there. Last one from @BuckeyeAM. Are we really going to see that Viking of a punter really hammer the football this year? Tony, I think we just need to start with the concept of Australian Vikings. Man, that is a terrifying, terrifying thought.
Yeah, this is this Barry Bonds on steroids beyond. Like, you can't. These are two. You don't cross these streams of Vikings and Australians and punting. Those are. You know how that this would create some sort of a crater in the desert where it now becomes a national park. So the idea of a Viking Australian is fantastic, and frankly, I'm surprised there aren't some sort of like graphic novels about this sort of thing because you could really do a lot of it. And then on the side, he battles magical beasts and is also a punter. Like, it's all coming together. This time is going to be better than Brown Thunder. I can feel it. Will we see him hammer the football this year? I think we will see him punt more than we did last year. The problem is when you do see him punt, you have no idea if he's going to hammer it or if he's going to thumb it. If there's a foot version of thumbing it, you just don't know right now, and he's working on that consistency. But I do think we will see him punt more than one or two punts that he had last year. I don't know that. The job is wide open, like in terms of Joe McGuire is probably still leading, but he did not do so well last year that he cannot be beaten out. And so I think fall camp we'll see. Remember, he was really close to what he was a week away from winning the job last year. Nick McLarty. I guess we should say his name. I don't know if we did. If we did, yeah, everyone just knows who we're talking about. But Ryan Day said he was leading, and then the following week it was Joe McGuire out there punting with during the game.
Yeah, and it was a consistency thing. We got a chance to talk to Nick McLarty a little bit this spring, and he talked about the fact that it was really just getting the stuff done quicker. They have a certain amount of time they want snap and then ball off your foot in a certain amount of time. And, if he has a little more time and he can take an extra, half a second or whatever it is, yeah, he can boom them. It's just getting the mechanics and of all that down to catch, step, kick, just like balls out real quick, and get those mechanics down to the point that you're doing it consistently. I don't know that there's any question that he has the bigger leg of the two guys, but Joe McGuire was kind of the safer choice last year because you could get to 42 yards by just having him kick 42 yards a bunch of times, as opposed to, this one went 57 and then this one went 32. And, you not knowing exactly what you're going to get. And also not knowing, are you going to kick it? We saw Nick McLarty in practice last year kick some where it was like, I don't know that I've ever seen hang time like I saw with those. And then there were other ones where he'd kick a line drive and it's like, oh boy, that's real returnable if there's someone back there. So it's purely a consistency thing where, at their best, Nick McLarty is probably your best option if they both are, kicking, what the 99th percentile kick for both of those guys. Nick McLarty's is going further, higher, better than Joe McGuire's, but it's just purely a consistency thing. And a lot like when we talk about running backs and what's going to determine running backs, like ball security and blitz pickup, what's going to determine wide receivers, how are you blocking outside? It's like all the stuff, everyone wants to go like, oh man, look at him kick that ball, and how high it goes and how far it goes. If it's not doing that consistently, it doesn't, that you only get partial credit for that. So it's a lot of the stuff it's the boring stuff that actually ends up deciding these. Because Ohio State, this is not a Jim Tressel team where you're going to run the ball 3 times and punt and play field position. You're not playing for Kirk Ferentz. You're playing for a team that's going to score on offense. You just have to you don't want to have the line drive punt that goes 35 yards that gets caught on the run and you throw your coverage timing off and all that kind of stuff. You kind of have to have consistency because you don't need to win the game on special teams. You just need to not lose the game on special teams. And just consistency and reliability goes into that a lot.
Yeah, they don't want a wild card in the special teams. And until he's no longer a wild card, then you'll probably see Joe McGuire. But that'll do it. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the thumbs up. We would appreciate that. Hit the bell to be notified. Just follow along as we'll be dropping shows all time. It is now summer. It may not look like it, or the calendar does not read summer. It is officially sports media, college football media summer. And hey, the next time we talk to you, there's probably going to be like college football magazines around. Not quite true, but next month, that's when it all starts happening. So we have made it. Rejoice, we can finally take a break. That's not true. There's no breaks going on, but if you're listening via your podcast platform of choice, a 5-star rating and review would also be appreciated. And as always, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we're talking about all of this and much more. You can find us there in the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. Stop by, say hello to us there. We'd love to see us. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.